Right, what is up YouTube? Hope you're all having a great day whatever time you're watching this. I'm going to run you through my current off-season updates, I guess where I'm at in terms of how training's going, what my diet is currently like. There's been some changes as my body weight was starting to stall, so food has now been upped. Currently on training days like today, my food is now at 5,250 calories roughly. That's 920 grams of carbs, 53 grams of fats, and I think that's like 275 grams of protein. So yeah, it's quite a good bit of food. I'm not really having any issues getting it down. I always opt for low volume sources, so I include a lot of honey, jam. My post-workout meal, the biggest meal a day, is primarily based from cereal, so Frosties and Cocoa Pops, which is very easy to get down, especially when you mix it with the Perform white chocolate raspberry protein as like a milk, whey paste, whatever you want to call it. Rest day macros are very similar. I have had a little bit of a play around with them though. Previously, they were about 400 grams of carbs, about 100, just shy of 100 grams of fat, and 275 grams of protein, I think. Whereas now I've experimented with a little bit higher protein intake and a little bit lower fat intake. So protein is now at 300 grams, fats are now at 85 grams, and carbs are now at 420 grams. So the net calorie intake is still a bit higher. However, I've pulled down the fat slightly and increased the protein. Why have I done this? Essentially, when you intake an excess amount of protein beyond what your body, I guess, needs for its essential functions of basically repairing the muscle tissue, skin health, etc., it gets converted to carbs through a process called gluconeogenesis. I know I'm definitely intaking enough protein through my diet. However, I don't necessarily want to be pushing my fat intake much higher at this point. I don't necessarily want to be pushing my carbs intake too high on these rest days because I want to keep my body as insulin sensitive as I can on the training days when the carbs are ridiculously high at like 920 grams. So the option really was protein, and some people, if you eat too much protein, it can give you some appetite issues. At the moment, I'm feeling absolutely fine eating higher protein. Digestion hasn't really been affected at all. The higher protein has primarily been in my first meal. So previously I was just eating 6 eggs. Now I'm eating 4 whole eggs, 250 grams of egg whites, and 2 chicken sausages. So yeah, that meal now contains 65 grams of protein. So it's a little bit more, but no issues getting it down really. If anything, I'm actually feeling a little bit more satiated on my rest days, whereas before I was like, especially after that first meal, I was very hungry going into my second meal. So it's quite nice actually, if anything. But yeah, in terms of training's going pretty well at the moment. I think I'm probably due a bit of deload. I was probably going to take one maybe like a week ago because it would have aligned pretty well with my work exams and stuff, but I didn't. I just decided to continue through, and training's still been progressing, so I don't really see too much of a need to. However, I am noticing I'm getting up to the point where I'm probably due taking one at some point now. I'm feeling a little bit battered, but not an issue. Still pushing on for now until I make that call. So yeah, I'm not currently on the way to the gym or on the way to work, but I will catch you in the gym for first upper body session of the week. Let's get it. Right, bit of a run through of the session. Starting out with a single arm lat pull down on a cable machine. Now, if you've watched any of my previous upper body sessions, you'll know that I usually do this on the Nautilus plate loaded pull down. However, that's currently getting painted and getting some new like thigh pads put onto it because they were starting to rip up a little bit. So maintenance work is underway for that. And although there is a few other decent pull down machines in the gym, I don't really like them that much. So I've opted to just use it on a normal cable with the mini half bench setup, which is really good. If your gym has this mini half bench, definitely try doing these sort of pull downs on that instead of like a normal bench. I find it a lot easier to brace against than a normal bench, and I find that the bench doesn't get in the way of my arm, which helps because this means I can actually execute the movement properly. But the absolute same cues apply onto this exercise. You want to try and keep your chest up. You want to drive that elbow down into the pocket of your hip. Keep the leg of whichever arm you are pulling with in front, and keep the set going until you cannot get that elbow any further down. And use wrist straps, of course, so your grip doesn't give out at any point. The main difference that I've noticed between doing this exercise on the cables and doing it on the old Nautilus machine that I usually use is mainly the resistance profile. I personally find it a lot harder to get the lat fully contracted when using cables, whereas on the Nautilus, if you angle the seat really low and the thigh pad really low, so you're basically starting right from the bottom, it tends to bias a lot more of that stretch. Well, not a lot more, but it tends to bias the stretch position a bit more than it would if you started with the seat really high. So it depends on how you'd set that machine up, but with cables, you're sort of limited in terms of how you set them up, really. You can alter where you actually position yourself in terms of distance from the cable, of course, by moving where the position of the bench is. But unless you have access to prime cables where you can actually manipulate the resistance profile, then the actual resistance that comes through the cable is fixed. But if you keep your form tight, it should still feel good regardless. In terms of sets on here, I am doing 3 sets total. First set was my heaviest set where I got 6.5 reps. Then the second set was a little bit lighter than that, got 8.5 reps. Then the third set, I dropped the weight a little bit further down and I got 13 reps, I think. Then we moved on to the low incline Smith machine. And the usual Smith that I tend to use, the Cybex version 1, I think it is. Mark 1, whatever you want to call it. That was taken. So I wasn't going to wait around because I could tell that the people who were on it were going to be on it for about 40 minutes, which they were. And there was like 4 of them, so I had no chance of working in. So I decided to try the other Smith machine, the Cybex Mark 2, I think it is. And in terms of how heavier this one actually feels, I wouldn't say it feels heavier. I initially thought that it was lighter before I tried it, but going into it, it's probably pretty equal in terms of how heavy this is compared to the normal Mark 1 that I use. Because I got the same amount of reps as I did last week on the top set, and then on the back off, I got an extra rep and a quarter up. So I got a full 8 reps on the back off set, and I had the same weight as I did last week on both sets. So pretty happy with how that went. I'm pretty happy that the resistance is pretty much the same on both of these Smith machines, because now that means that if one of them is being taken, I can just go into the other one and it's not really going to affect my progression in any way because they are basically the same, which will of course save me waiting around for the Smith machine that I actually want. I am usually happy to wait, but not for 40 minutes. I have things to do. So then after this, we moved on to the Life Fitness Dip machine. And after reviewing a lot of my training footage and just sort of assessing how I actually feel after each set, I've noticed that I previously have been leaning over quite significantly when I'm doing this. On this set here, I am still leaning over quite a bit, so I do probably still need to try and get myself a bit more upright. But previously I was leaning over even more than that. And what this meant is I was probably putting a lot of tension on my pecs, which I do want my pecs to work on this movement. It is a compound movement, so it is going to activate my lower chest regardless of how I do it. But I primarily want this to bias my triceps. So to do that, I want to be ideally keeping my chest a little bit more upright and keeping my body a bit more upright as a whole. So that is what I've been working on these last couple of sessions. I've still been using the same weights. I've just dropped I'm only like a rep down now on the top set. So I think previously when I was leaning over quite a bit, I was on like 6 reps. Now I'm on 4 on the top set. And on the back off, I got 9 on this set, I think. I'll double check. And when I was leaning over a little bit more, I think I managed to get 10.5. So I'm pretty much doing almost exactly what I did, but with better execution for what I'm trying to target, which is my triceps on this. So yeah, happy with how these are going. And I do love recording this exercise in particular because my shoulder vein always likes to poke its way right through the screen each time I do a rep, which is always nice to see. And it is still one of those things that people always ask me how I can get a shoulder vein. It's just a vein. Everyone has them. Some people just poke out more in irregular places. Like, I've had that shoulder vein since probably before I even lifted. Well, I've always had the vein there, obviously, but it's came out when I've been, let's say, lifting something, even when I was weighing about 58 kilos and I had no muscle. So it's not something you can really target. After this, moved on to T-bar row. So I've gone up a little bit in weight on this. I've added the little 0.5 kilo plate. And I managed to get up maybe like a quarter of a rep compared to what I did last week with just the 320s and a 5. So I'm happy with that. This is feeling good as always. I've definitely gotten better at doing the T-bar because in the past when I would do this exercise, I would come off it and I wouldn't necessarily feel much in like my traps, my rear delts or any of like my upper back. I would just feel it constantly all in my like erectors and lower back because my chest was flying off the pad and I was using my erectors to try and essentially do the exercise. Whereas now I've been focusing significantly more on just keeping my chest as glued to the pad as I can, which has definitely made it more accurate on my traps and upper back because when I come off the set now, I can feel it primarily through those muscles as opposed to my erectors. And in terms of the DOMs that I get the next day, it is in the places where I want to actually train, as opposed to the places where I still want to develop. I do still want my erectors to get better, just not necessarily through a T-bar row, more so from more erector specific movements like RDLs, stiff legs. But yeah, happy on this set as well. This was my third set on here. I did a little bit in weight extra and I managed to maintain the reps. And then the set before that, which I haven't put on here because the video would be too long if I throw in every single set, was also pretty good. I went up a little bit in weight on that and maintained the same amount of reps, which I was happy with. Then we're moving back onto the lats. We're doing a machine lat pullover. And this time, now I've got a seat belt in my gym bag. I've decided to try that on this machine, which I've noticed it help actually. With this machine, you sort of really have to sort of dig yourself into it through your quads and stuff, just by like pushing yourself against the seat, which I still do. I still kind of activate my quads through this. However, by strapping myself in with the seat belt, I can just make sure that my, I guess, body sticks to that bench and I'm not slipping out of place, which is always beneficial. You don't want to slip off the bench by accident. And it of course gives me more stability, so I can generate more force through the movement and therefore place more tension on the muscle, which is what I want. And it also means that I don't necessarily have to try and consciously think about staying on the seat, which means all my focus is primarily on just driving that elbow down into the sides of my hips, which obviously contracts my lats. So yeah, 2 sets on here. Pretty much do the same weight on both of them. Well, it's like 1 pin apart, but I'm hovering within the same sort of rep range between about 10 and 12. I don't like to necessarily drop the reps too low on this exercise because it's an isolation exercise, and I find that if I go too heavy on isolation exercises, they don't really stay isolation exercises. I tend to bring in other muscle groups to try and take over the movement, which I don't want because I want them to be isolation exercises. I only want to bias the lat with that exercise. And when I am doing the single arm lat pull down, I do some lower rep sets. Never go below 6, but that is giving me a bit of, let's say, lowered exposure to the lat through that exercise. And then after that, we're moving on to the lying cuffed cable lateral raise, which 100% is my favourite side delt exercise. Since doing this, I've been doing it for a while. I've been doing it for probably over a year now. My delts are the best they've ever been. The shape of them is the best it's ever been. And that I do contribute that primarily to this exercise. And I can tell how effective this is based on how my delts feel immediately after the set and how they feel the next day. When I go to contract my delt the next day by just doing like mimicking a lateral raise movement, I can pretty much only feel the DOMs through the side delt, not through the rear delt, not through the front delt, not through the trap even. Well, I feel it from the trap through the T-bar, but not through like the lateral raise movement, if that makes sense. And that is because this exercise is just so accurate at training the side delts, if you do it correctly, that it's pretty much impossible for them not to get a crazy stimulus from it, which is what you want. So with that, what I would focus on is just trying to keep my pinky angled towards the ceiling and just trying to drag those, essentially the cuffs, to the walls next to me and not shrug at the same time, especially as it gets difficult. And it's hard to go wrong from there. And then after that, moving on to the cable katana overhead extension. And I did do both of these last 2 exercises normally with the Cybex cable downstairs, but that has broken. So I'm using the Life Fitness one upstairs, which is still a good cable. So, I mean, there's not really any bad cables in this gym, to be fair. But this felt great as well. Did 3 sets total, pyramiding down in weight on each of them, up in reps. And when I'm setting this up, I basically have the cuff on each arm and I place my hand through each of them as if I'm holding onto it like it's a tricep rope, and then basically cross my arms over as I squat down and bring them over my head, which you'll be able to see as I set this exercise up. Now, that does take a little bit of practice getting the hang of that. You can kind of tie yourself in a bit of a knot if you get it all in the wrong order, but same as anything, just takes practice. Right, yes guys, that is session wrapped up. First one of the week ticked off. I feel absolutely mega after that because that went really well. I've covered most of the talking points in voiceover, so I'm not going to ramble too much on about that, but thought I would circle back to what I was talking about this morning about my off season and how it's going so far. So yeah, I did mention that I'm not really having any issue getting the food down. Actually eating the meal and getting the food in isn't too much of a chore. I mean, I'm used to eating when I don't necessarily feel like eating because I did it for so many years, I guess, trying to essentially push my body weight up prior to like competing and stuff. which is, I guess, how I built all my muscle, really. So yeah, I don't necessarily have an issue getting the food down. It's more so just how you feel throughout the day. You feel very sluggish because when you're trying to digest 5,250 calories per day, that's a lot of calories for your body to digest, and that actually takes energy for your body to do that. So it's quite hard to sort of be able to switch your mind onto doing things because your body is constantly preoccupied digesting food. So you're definitely more sluggish for sure. But yeah, life doesn't stop when you want to bulk, so you need to just get your shit done regardless of how you feel in that moment. Same as when you're dieting. When you're low energy in a diet because you're eating less food, you still need to get stuff done. So you just kind of need to lock in. Both scenarios are challenging. They're just challenging in a different way. And it will be a test for you as a person trying to build your physique to navigate through either phase, because they are both just as important as each other when it comes to truly displaying your best physique and achieving your potential per se. But yeah, everything's going well. Training's going pretty well. My upper sessions are pretty much just progressing each week. They're definitely not progressing as fast as they were at the beginning of the off season, when I pretty much just started a new split and my body's like acclimating to all the new exercises. Whereas now, I've definitely hit the wall on some exercises and I'm just pushing through it ever so slightly, which is where the true progress takes place. And I've noticed that I am getting bigger for sure, especially through my upper body. Lower body is progressing, it's just not progressing as fast as it has been in the past. In the previous video, speaking to Reese, he did mention that my upper body is now more so in proportion with my lower body, which was the judge's feedback. So going into my next few shows in either next year or the year after, depending on whether I feel like I am big enough to be competitive and win them, because that is the goal, to win the PCA natural finals, hopefully, unless it should be a clear run. That's very cocky and arrogant of me to say that. Last year I placed 4th in the British natural finals, and the 3 guys who beat me were all 22 or 23, so by the time I compete next year, none of them will be in juniors anymore. So theoretically, provided that no freaks of nature show up, there shouldn't be anyone in my way per se. However, there could always be a freak of nature that shows up, so you can never get too comfortable. Hence why I'm trying to make as much progress as possible during this off season, because feedback was still to get bigger, especially through the upper body, especially through the chest, back, arms. I think delts weren't necessarily something that I needed to bring up a crazy ton, but I have definitely still brought them up a lot, probably more than anything else actually, which is never a bad thing. I personally don't think you can ever have side delts in particular that are too big. You can never be wide enough, right? So everything's going well. In terms of lower body training, my knee is hit or miss. Some sessions go really well. Some sessions on certain quad compound exercises will feel spot on and I will progress them exactly how I want to. Some sessions I'll notice at my warm-ups, my knee's just a bit like and then me being stubborn will just try the top set anyway and probably get 1 or 2 reps before my knee just gives out, which is not ideal. It's really frustrating, but it just is what it is. What I have been doing when my knee is playing up is just trying to take higher rep sets and not get overly psyched up going into it. Just really focus on controlling the movement, and I guess taking a bit more of like a time under tension approach instead of a just full fucking send it approach, which I much prefer the full fucking send it approach, but needs must. If my knee's playing up, my knee's playing up. I don't really have any other choice if I still want to make progress, that is. I'd rather take a bit more of a boring approach to those sets than not do the sets at all. And then in terms of the diet, like I said this morning, food's gone up, not really having any issue getting it down, feel more sluggish throughout the day, but that is what it is. It's just going well, everything's in a good spot, just ticking along, doing the do. Same old stuff, just done better each week, and that is how progress is made. Don't need to reinvent the wheel, don't need to try a bunch of fancy shit, just need to do what works consistently and find a way to make it enjoyable, because some people will get bored doing the same thing week in, week out. I personally don't. My mental approach to doing the same thing week in, week out is to just set sort of mini goals in my head, like, right, last week got 8 reps on whatever exercise with X amount of weight. This time I want 9 reps. And I'm setting those mini goals each time I set foot in the gym, try and beat them, of course, progressive overload and all that. And then I also set mini goals in terms of the other things involved with the process, like I try and get all my meals bang on time. I set little challenges to try and do that. Try and get to bed on time. I try and get all the cardio, well, I don't try, I get all my cardio done. I have not missed a single cardio session this off season. Make sure I take off my step goals, and I set these mini goals each day, and if I hit them all, tick all the boxes, that is the day one, and that is how I get my like fulfillment, I guess you could say. So yeah, everything's going well. I'm gonna eat my, oh, lovely. Everything is going well. I'm gonna eat my post-workout meal now when I get back inside. I just need to make that up quickly. Right guys, still got somewhat of a resemblance of the pump. No, it's fully gone now pretty much. But yeah, I thought I would show you how to make a whey paste. So this is something you can drizzle on like oats, something you can drizzle on. How I do it is I drizzle it all over my cereal, use it as like a glue / milk type thing. So essentially what you're gonna need is your whey protein, which I am going with the GOAT, best flavour I've ever tried, white chocolate raspberry. I'm sure I've plugged this flavour about a million times at this point. I'm not sponsored, but this is the GOAT. Genuinely, I don't think anybody who's tried this has said it's bad or disappointing. And it's one of the few flavours that I just never get sick of, ever. So yeah, does not disappoint. So yeah, you'll need this, and what you're gonna need to do is boil your kettle. I'm sure you have a kettle, hopefully. And then you're gonna weigh out the amount of whey that you want. I'm personally going with 30 grams because I've got the other 20 grams of whey in this meal in my bowl of cream rice. 30 grams of whey weighed out into this bowl. And then, let me bring you with me. So if you can see this. But if you can see my scales here, yeah. So obviously zero them out. I'm gonna do 45 grams of water in with this. So I'm doing like a 1 to 1.5 ratio. This is my preferred consistency. And then essentially all I'm gonna do is stir this up. So I'm gonna speed this up so you don't have to watch me stir for ages. And then 2 minutes later maybe, we have the whey paste. Let me just show you it here. So yeah, it looks like a big slush, not slush, like just goo if anything. The most satisfying part is actually drizzling it onto the cereal. So you don't want to see this. I have it so thick that it doesn't do the traditional like drip thing. It just sort of falls and like, yeah. And then obviously you're gonna mix that in after it's done. Or you could just eat it on top, like a little bit of a topping. But personally, I prefer to mix it all up. It kind of makes the cereal stick together, which is nice. So yeah, that's a bit of a tutorial for you lot. Not only can you learn how to lift weights and get big, but you can learn how to make your food taste delicious with the use of a whey drip. So yeah, now that is us wrapped up. I'm going to eat this and then go to bed because I'm knackered. So adios.